Now, when we eat something like pizza, for example, the carbohydrates in the pizza are broken down into glucose in the blood. Now, we need that glucose to go from the blood into the body's cells, so we can use glucose for energy, right? And so the hormone insulin triggers this process. So essentially, insulin triggers glycolysis to take place. Now, specifically, insulin acts on a receptor that helps take glucose directly into the cell. But this receptor is actually open on both ends. So just because glucose gets into the cell, that doesn't mean it can't slip back out of the cell and back into the blood, because there's nothing that is holding glucose inside the cell once it gets in there. So that's a problem. Now, we want glucose to stay inside the cell, right? But in order to make sure it stays inside the cell, glucose needs a phosphate group, which will sort of act like a glue that will help glucose stay locked inside the cell. Now, there's a very famous molecule called ATP, and the letters in ATP stand for adenosine triphosphate, with the tri meaning that it has 3 phosphate groups. Now, ATP actually has the ability to transfer its phosphate groups. So an enzyme helps transfer a phosphate group from ATP to glucose, and magnesium actually helps the enzyme do this as well. So now when this happens, adenosine triphosphate turns into adenosine diphosphate, aka ADP, with the di in diphosphate referring to the fact that this molecule now only has 2 phosphate groups. And our glucose molecule now has a phosphate group on it. So now we call it glucose-6-phosphate.